Don't forget to press the bell icon so that you get the notification whenever we come out with this video. I know I have not been very regular in coming out with these video blogs. I hope to discipline myself and come into doing this almost regularly on a weekly basis. Hello and welcome to News Warrior, BharatShakti.in's own video blog. I am Nitin Gokhale. About 10 days ago, leaders from the top 20 countries in the world met at what is called the G20 summit in Argentina. At that summit, there were of course the usual multilateral ritualistic meetings between all the 20 leaders of the topmost economies in the world. But what was interesting at that summit were the meetings on the sidelines. There were several bilateral meetings that happened between important leaders, important global leaders. From India's point of view, there were two very crucial trilateral meetings that happened. One was called the Japan-America-India, or JAI, the acronym that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has coined. Meeting between President Trump, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and Prime Minister Modi. And the second trilateral was RIC, that is Russia, India, China, where President Vladimir Putin, Indian Prime Minister, and President Xi Jinping of China met separately. So what do these trilateral meetings signify really? It signifies one fact, that India's stature as a rising economy, in fact the fastest rising economy in the world for 2 consecutive years, is being noticed the world over. That apart, India's geographical position and growing comprehensive national power is being recognized by major global and international powers. Why do I say that? I say that because both Trump in America and Shinzo Abe in Japan realize that India needs to be in its fold or in its camp if US and Japan have to counterbalance a rising China, mainly in Indo-Pacific or mainly in Asia. On the other hand, Russia and China both feel that they should have good relations with India because China feels that in the ongoing trade war with the United States, it needs both Russia and India to be neutral, if not exactly friendly. And that's a very interesting triangle that has emerged, although the RIC meeting had taken place, a similar Russia, India, China meeting on the sidelines of G20 had taken place almost 12 years ago. The fact is it has got a major salience this year because China is feeling the pinch of the US trade war launched by President Trump. And it has never been rattled, according to observers of China, long-time observers of China. China has never been rattled as it has been because of the trade tariffs and the kind of aggressive posture taken by US against China, as it has now, except for 2 earlier occasions. One is the Tiananmen Square massacre, which took place in 1989, and the collapse of the Soviet Union, which also shook China, and in fact the leadership then had to take a lot of care not to allow the ripple effect of the collapse of Soviet Union to travel into China, given the fact that China also has or had similar structures as the erstwhile Soviet Union to control the population and keep tight control over the state itself. But before I talk about the Japan-India or Japan-America-India trilateral, let me sort of give you an update on what China is doing to offset the American war on trade and the Chinese entities. You are aware, most of you would be aware, that the daughter and the chief financial officer of the founder of Huawei, the giant telecom company from China, has been arrested in Canada at the insistence of America. And that is now likely to play out as a major tension point between the US and China. So how does China deal with this new posture that the Americans have taken? It is doing two things. One, it is keeping its head down and not confronting US directly for keeping the powder dry in the long run, and two, it is reaching out to countries like India and Japan to keep the temperatures down in Asia, because the contestation between the US and China is going to be in Asia, or what we call the larger Indo-Pacific. In India's definition, the Indo-Pacific ranges from the eastern shores of Africa to the western Pacific, and therefore the Chinese want India to be neutral. It does not want India to become hostile as it had in 2017 during the Doklam crisis. So the Wuhan summit was part of that outreach. So was the invitation to the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to travel to China. He became the first Japanese Prime Minister to visit China in 8 years. So that kind of thaw the Chinese have attempted with global powers based in Asia, and with the US it is keeping its head down and not really confronting it directly as it has done so in the past. There are other problems that President Xi Jinping faces domestically. One is that the economy has slowed down, and the job generation is not happening at the same pace as it has happened over the past 30 or nearly 40 years now, from 1978 when the Chinese opened up and liberalized their economy. So he has a major problem at hand. Secondly, by removing the restrictions on the term of the president and appointing himself a president for life, therefore President Xi is under tremendous pressure, and therefore his outreach to countries like India and Japan. As far as the other trilateral, that is Japan, America, India is concerned, the US is desperately trying to retain its hegemony in the old Asia Pacific and the new Indo-Pacific by stitching together or trying to stitch together alliances where the alliance of democracy, as Shinzo Abe had described, is one of the driving forces against China. But India realizes that it cannot allow the others to dictate its policy towards China, because remember, amongst all the countries who have problems with China, India is the only one which has a long and contentious border with China, 4,000-kilometer long border, which is unsettled and it's disputed. Therefore, India has to chart its own course as far as bilateral relationship with China is concerned, and India is doing exactly that. It is not going all out to be part of what is called the quadrilateral between Australia, Japan, US and India. It is keeping the expectations low. India is not going in for any military alliance as far as US is concerned. Will never go into a military alliance. And India is also keeping its options open to buy defense platforms, defense weapons from the old trusted friends like Russia, keeping the options open. It buys weapons and platforms from France, which the Americans don't like, but that is the reality. So to sum it up, India will have to fight its own battles, no matter how friendly it becomes with whichever country. At the moment, the policy is to multi-align, to have the alignment with all major powers, major global players, but act in own national interest. And that is what Prime Minister Modi and his national security team has been able to do in the past 3 or 4 years. But in the past 1 year, the intensity of these rivalries and these tensions between major global players has increased, putting much more pressure on Indian diplomacy and the decision makers in India. Finally, the criticism that India is losing its primacy in its own neighborhood in South Asia, in the Indian subcontinent, is of course partly true, but that's true of almost everybody and every region. Look at what's happening to the Americans. It is losing influence over Canada and Mexico, or in its own backyard in North America. It does not have a similar relationship with Europe, which it used to have in the earlier times. Australians are petrified that their clout and influence in the Pacific island nations, the small island nations, is being challenged by China, and therefore the Australians are taking measures to sort of obviate that clear sign that China is coming into Pacific in a big way. And of course, India has been battling this dilemma of keeping good relations with its smaller neighbors, at the same time trying to counter the Chinese influence, be it in Maldives, in Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, you name it. And the Chinese are attempting to reduce Indian influence. India is attempting to retain its influence. So this game of jostling will go on, and diplomacy has become, as a result, much more complex than before and much more challenging. That is the reality, and a global scan one can look at this moment. How it will pan out in coming months, especially when India is going to go for general elections in the summer of 2019, will have to be watched. But the fact is, it is a challenging time for India and other major global players trying to retain the current global order as it has existed for the past 60 years or so, challenging the Chinese rise in the past few years. For the moment, I'm going to wind up, but do keep sending your feedback, your comments. Also keep liking our YouTube page. We are also on Facebook and Twitter. So keep liking and commenting and engaging with us on all those platforms. Until the next time, it's goodbye and good luck.